be speaking with KaeLyn Rich. They are a class of 2005 and studied English and Women's Studies. Before I introduce you to them, I'll tell you more about myself. I'm a graphic design and communications double major, and on campus, I'm the secretary and public relations director of the Queer and Trans Outreach Center. And I've worked on campus, in the Compass, and with Excel and Career Services. So, hey, KaeLyn, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, I just shared with everyone your class and what you studied at Oswego, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, for sure. So yeah, my parents were not super thrilled with my major choices, although I would say ultimately it worked out in my career path, which we will talk about. But yeah, I ultimately studied like fiction, poetry, and feminism.
I like that.
Absolutely no regrets about it. Yeah, so I live in Rochester, and actually I think, Micah, you and I are in the same city right now, this very moment in this pandemic.
Sure.
I'm here with my spouse, who's also an Oswego alum. We were just talking before we hopped on, actually. I used to be, I don't think these organizations exist in this way anymore, so you have to imagine the early aughts for this. But my partner was the president of the Rainbow Alliance, and I was the co-director of the Women's Center, and we actually met on campus, and we're friends for a long time before we became more than friends, and have been together ever since. So Oswego and identity and like life are very, very, very closely entrenched for me. In terms of like who I am and what I do, I queer, bisexual, Korean American adoptee. I, like I said, live in upstate New York in Rochester, where I've made my home. I call myself a feminist, leader, activist, speaker, and writer, which is a very like fancy sounding way of saying I have a lot of jobs. Like a lot of older millennials, I've always had a lot of jobs. So we talk about that in a little bit, but I am like currently the VP of organizational advancement at UltraViolet, the premier national organization advocating for gender justice issues to drive feminist cultural and political change and expose the white supremacist patriarchy using that women's studies degree. I'm also a staff writer for autostraddle.com, in my opinion, like one of the best websites in the world, a digital publication and real life community for multiple generations of LGBTQIA+ people and their friends. I'm occasionally a professor of women and gender studies at some colleges. Right now I'm teaching at the University of Rochester and SUNY Brockport. And I'm also an author. My book, Girls Resist, A Guide to Activism, I should know the name of my book, Girls Resist, Activism and Starting a Revolution, came out in 2018 and is available at the library and wherever you want to get books. I'm also a parent of both fur kids and a live human kid, and parenting the pandemic at this moment, which is why you may have noticed, or maybe you didn't, we had to adjust the time of this because I'm doing remote kindergarten with my little right now. So if anyone out there is also a caregiver, like much love to you in this moment.
Absolutely. Great. Well, awesome. Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we get into some questions?
I don't think so. Just go for it.
Great. Okay. So I have 4 questions, as you know, and then if you have any questions out in the audience, feel free to pop them in the chat and we will get to them at the end. So I will start. What do you do currently and how did you get there?
Yeah, it just sort of said.
Yes.
But how did I get there? It was a series of different things. So I often say that like I'm a Jill of many trades, but like a master of none, which is not totally true. I do have some expertise, but I've kind of been all over. To be honest, my career path started honestly with the kind of stuff that you're doing at Oswego, Micah, like with student leadership. So through my work, I was like always been a joiner. Did a lot of work on campus. So with the Women's Center was one of them, but also with other student organizations. I would say the Women's Center is probably the most central to how I got on this path. Number one, figured out that like I could do comparable work and get paid for it in some way, but like working with other organizations that did professional feminist work. And because it like set me up with the connections to start taking that path myself, to take that first step. So my first job out of college was with Services to Aid Families, which is the DV and intimate partner violence and sexual assault crisis intervention program in Oswego. And just like a, hourly job working in the shelter, it helped me figure out a lot about what I wanted to do with my life. Though at the same time, I was already working multiple jobs. I was working part-time at Planned Parenthood in Syracuse, doing campus organizing as like a staff person with other students about my same age, because I was right out of college, and building that program for them on a part-time basis. And by working both those jobs, I actually thought I've almost gone to grad school 5 times and actually went once. Through doing both those things at the same time, I realized I actually did not want to go get my social work degree, which is what I thought I was much more interested in the like policy work, the organizing work, the like how do we move the big rocks versus try to like work within a system that is inherently flawed and working with people who have the least. So it helped me figure out that was the path I wanted to go on. I spent about 15 years in both professional and personal community organizing, grassroots organizing, and then more kind of like professional organizing, policy, legislative work, mostly at the state level. I also at the same time started cultivating kind of like writing as a side project. So started writing for Autostraddle, started writing for the internet, wrote this book. I did a brief stint as the executive director of Bitch Media, most recently before I came on to UltraViolet. But those sort of like disparate experiences all kind of stacked up on each other, if that makes sense. And they really started with me getting involved on campus, which sounds very cliche. And like maybe SUNY services like paid me to say it, but it's really, if I had not been a student leader, I wouldn't have connected with the staff people at SAFE. The way I got the job, because I wasn't a social work student, I was a writing student, was through those connections as a student. And then like that job opened up doors for me to figure out more about what I wanted to do and move on from there. I should say also my part-time Planned Parenthood job even was like sort of through local connections. I was going through a rough time right after I graduated. So I didn't like just graduate and get these jobs. There was a period where I was like working in fast food, which I worked all through high school and college. I have no like negative things to say about fast food work, but obviously I had a lot of student debt and wanted to.
Yeah, certainly.
So I was working like in fast food for a while. I actually applied for I'm blanking on the name, AmeriCorps program in Oswego. There were only 2 applicants. I did not get that position. But the person interviewed me, saw this other part-time role at Planned Parenthood and sent it to me and said, I think this would be a better fit for you. And also reached out to someone she knew there and said like, hey, I met this person who I think is interesting, you should interview her. So like absolutely the work I did on campus beyond my classes was actually what set me up the most for this like weird winding path I've taken.
Sorry about that. Technological issues. Yes, definitely. Networking has been the biggest part of my career, so I definitely understand where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how would you say your identity has played a part in your path so far?
It's also a good question. So I mean, my identity is multifaceted, right? So I'm a woman, a cisgender woman. I'm queer and bisexual. I am Korean. I'm an adoptee. All of these sort of things together. Some of the identities like people just see when they see me, and so they're always a part of your path when you walk in life as a person of color or someone who like visibly stands out in some way. People are going to have their own like implicit biases, and hopefully some like it also helps you connect with other people around you. So some of that is just like how you walk in the world. In terms of my like less visible identities, for me at least, because I can like easily pass in the world as like not queer or bisexual if I want to. I made a really conscious choice right out of college, for better or worse. And this was not so long ago, but it was long enough ago that it was a little bit like I would say people still like caution you against, like for example, putting the Rainbow Alliance on your resume. It wasn't something you necessarily wanted to like put right out there, especially no offense to Oswego, but in Oswego County, it might not be. Yeah, so I made an early decision, and I was lucky to have the support to be able to do so. Like I don't know if it's like safe for one to do this, but to be out in my career from the very beginning. And I think that has been really important on my path to have like always to have made that decision early on and not had to like backtrack on it. I also will say I have like enough institutional privilege in my life, like as someone with a college education, as someone with relative economic stability, to be able to do that without like too much risk. I don't think everyone can like wear their identities on their sleeve all the time and still move forward on their path in the way they want to. I'm not people necessarily should make that the same choice that I did, but I do feel like boldness has carried the fear, including just like, you know, being, I mean, both being out, like when I was working in but I didn't need to be out to work in intimate partner violence, sexual assault services. Like it was being fine. It was a choice that I made. I will say, like, as I moved along my career and figured out what I wanted to do, what my passions were, that identity became more part of my work, right? So like writing for Autostraddle, which if it wasn't clear is like a queer publication, writing the book that I wrote in the way that I did, trying to be as like broad and inclusive around what role that includes, working for a feminist organization now. I didn't mention this before, but I also worked for like ACLU and Planned Parenthood at different points in my career, actually for a pretty long time at both of those organizations, which is also something like a bold choice. Someone answers things. So I've always felt like I have been like kind of leading in that way. I don't know how else to say it. Like that being out was really important to me personally.
Yeah, it sort of shaped how you proceeded in life.
Yes, that's a
yes. Yes. Do you have anything else that you would like to add on to that in association with your identity and shaping your path?
This is like the main thing that comes to mind for me. I will say, like, not just because you have an identity doesn't always mean that you're putting it into your life in this like intentional way. So I was very all about being out, even when I didn't have to be, and then also about that building that into what I wanted to do with my career as I got to the point where I was able to make those choices. I will say that actually, so interestingly, the thing that's like really obvious about it is that I am Asian, right? Maybe even you would guess like Korean, a very typical features for a Korean woman. I didn't really like come out, even though I am, as like a color or as like aligned with people of color until like midpoint in my career, to be honest, which is really, really interesting to like unpack. It has a lot to do with being an adoptee. I grew up in a rural area where I was an Asian person in my class, and we also just had very little like representational diversity. So there's like me, there was one Latina girl, there was one, I don't even know what his ethnicity was, like kid who's like his defining feature was he was Muslim, and there was one Black person. I remember all their names because that was us. We were at 40%. So I grew up not really having like a good understanding of, I knew I was Korean, but like owning that and seeing that as an experience as part of my identity. Throughout until my like mid-20s when I was well into my career. And it was still through this work though, through like choosing who I align myself with and how I work. It was through a leadership development program. And my moment where I was like, oh, like this is actually something that like has been really harmful for me to not own, and I need to own it going forward. I was in a subway at this like development program in New York City with this other Korean woman who's first generation Korean. Started talking about our experiences as like Korean people. We were on our way to dinner, just having like a casual subway conversation. And she said something, I was sharing just sort of how I'd never felt like Asian enough, or like I really understood my Asian identity. And she shared something that just like blew it wide open for me. You know, she said, just because like your experience as a Korean woman has been different than mine doesn't make it less of a Korean experience. Like they're both experiences of being Korean, which is so true. Korean adoption in particular, there's a large number of us, especially in the 80s, which is when I was born, that came into this country and have like really conflicted, a lot of us, relationships with being adoptees, transnational adoptees, transracial adoptees. So it is like a uniquely Korean experience in addition to it being like my Korean experience, which sounds very basic. And you'd think with all this other like activism work I've done that I would like have all those things would have clicked for me, but that was interesting in terms of my path is and it changed how I worked. It changed how I saw my role in the world to like move from a place of like, oh, I don't really like understand what it's like to be a color, to really be in alignment, both as like an ally to my like Black and brown sisters and brothers in the movement, and to like own my role as someone who can like do harm and also be like a part of a bigger community.
Absolutely.
Like decenter whiteness, basically, in my idea.
Yes, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
What is your best advice for students who have faced challenges or barriers related to their identity?
Great questions. You know, there's like so many of us, and the answers are so different. I would say it really comes down to just a couple of things. One is like, know what you are experiencing is real. So I think those of us who are experiencing challenges and barriers related to our identities deal with a whole range of things, from microaggressions to just outright aggressions and violence against us, and are also often told that it's like somehow our fault, or that we're like overemphasizing the things that are happening. So like, believe that your truth is real, and also know your worth more than that. And I will say beyond that, it's like a really individual based on what kind of resources you have. Like, are you safe to like go out and do the kind of things that I've done? Or are you not? Do you have the kind of like support where you can like live your truth, right? Or do you need to like figure out how to survive first?
Yeah.
Yes, regardless of like where you are on the spectrum of safety, to like really there's no such thing as like really moving past the barriers. They're always going to be there, but there is like saying like F you to them, basically, like flex going to like break through this and prove that it can be done. But even that comes with barriers, because for people with marginalized identities, the more visible we are, the more likely we're going to get backlash, right? So like the farther someone climbs, even if you look at like some pretty amazing celebrities that have broke barriers for people with marginalized identities, like Laverne Cox, for example, right? Janet Mock, have done like amazing work, right? And are getting a lot of credit for that they absolutely deserve. And they also are getting a lot of backlash and a lot of
absolutely
threats and like threats of violence. It's true for people like across the spectrum that are in the limelight, whether we're talking about politicians, celebrities, etc. So I will also, the other thing I would say is like, find your pod. Like, whether you are like still figuring out how to survive, or whether you are like thriving, you're still gonna have like hard stuff to deal with. So find those people like you. It might not always feel like they're there, but they definitely exist in this world. When I started writing for Autostraddle, it was partially because I wanted to write. And the unintended consequence was that I had reached a point in my life, in my, I was actually almost 30 when I started writing there, that I didn't have a lot of queer friends around anymore. Like, people had just moved on, moved away, just some people like settled down, or just like we had moved in different directions. It was not as easy as it is in college, if you consider easy in college, to sort of like find your group, because all of the weirdos are in the same spot, right?
Yeah.
So it's harder once you're like out in the world for a lot of people. So Autostraddle also came into my life at a time when I didn't realize I was looking for this, but I was looking for other queer people who were also like a little bit older, and had shared experiences, or could like model life in a different way from me, which was really powerful. So I will say, like, find your pod, like figure out, take a step. And if you don't know where they are, which is totally fair, just take a step in that direction. Whether that is like, if you know, if there is like a student group on campus, like challenge yourself to go to that meeting, just try it out, see how it feels. You know, if you are more of like an extroverted type person, you could like you could go the more robust route of like creating your own group, creating your own pod, or frankly, just like go up. Like, the people are out there, the groups are out there, to find the people who share your interests, whether that is like Dungeons and Dragons or being a queer Korean adoptee. There are other people.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Do you have any advice for maybe when we are in the future and we find that we don't have a complete pod and we want to find more people? Do you have any advice on that area?
Yeah, I mean, in the pandemic, it's a little odd because a lot of us are not going outside of our houses too much, which really limits pod finding abilities. So I would say, like, if we're pretending that the pandemic is not weighing on us in the way it's weighing on all of us, you know, I mean, before I got ready for this live, I was just like in my sweatpants, and I really need a haircut. Hopefully you can't tell, I use a lot of hair gel. But, none of us are living our best lives right now. So putting aside the thing we're in at the moment, I would say it's not dissimilar advice. Like, I think that you do have to take, I would say take one step Like, I think it can be overwhelming to think about, like, how do I make a friend, or how to go and like start a group or find the people. And it really can be just figuring out one step in the same way that you would in college, whether that is talking to people, joining like a group, even just like following people on social media can start to like bring you closer to other people like you. So maybe you're not even like ready to go out and like join a group or like claim identity. But maybe you could follow other people who are already doing that and just like start to feel like kind of retrain your brain to feel more ready for that moment and get some empowerment from that. So I would say even just like following people on TikTok, following people on social media, has been really, I mean, I know that's been really helpful for me to really curate what that timeline looks like and to feel really empowered by it.
Yes, absolutely.
And like, yeah, the typical advice. So like take one step, whether it's going out and joining a group, whether that is, you know, finding your people online, making one friend.
Yes,
going out
a step in the right direction is a good step.
or whatever is available to you.
Absolutely. All right. Since graduating, how have you learned more about your identity and the value it has brought to you as a professional? We covered that a little bit, but I'd like to hear a little bit more.
Like skipping ahead. Yeah, I mean, so what I talked about in terms of identifying and like really like getting to a better place on myself, understanding myself as a Korean American person, as a Korean adoptee, like getting to understand that I am like much more similar to other people, both who are first generation or who are mixed race, who are also have like complex relationships with race and their identity, and sometimes often with like whiteness and their identity and how it impacts them. I have found that it obviously has affected my life, right? Like I am closer to other people of color in a way that I just like wasn't letting myself be before. And I'm more able to like have empathy and like see a struggle as part of my struggle, having like taken that path, right? And less in terms of how it's like the values brought to me as a professional, I mean, as you can kind of tell, I sort of like lean boldly into who I am. So it has like opened up opportunities for me to bring that lens to like every place that I have worked, with varying levels of success, but to bring like a more inclusive lens to the workplace. For me personally, because it's just like who I am, like as in terms of my personality, I like to take on those kinds of projects. Not everybody wants the responsibility for that who has a marginalized identity, but I'm often the person who jumps in and is like, hey, I have an idea, or like I will join the committee. I will help with this project to bring more diversity, to bring more inclusion, to bring a better sense of belonging. I'm also finally in the organization I'm currently at for my like day job, UltraViolet. I've actually moved over from the community organizing space into like organizational administration, which sounds as like, I love it a lot. Mostly because working at a feminist organization that has more radical values, I'm able to make those choices in concert with like other people, right? To like both solicit the feedback from staff and try to make the choices that let us live our values in our workplace, which is like a big challenge in the nonprofit world, or what some people call the nonprofit industrial complex, is of course living the things inside the organization that you like espouse outside of the organization. So you know, I get to work on things like, you know, how we are treating our employees basically, and if yeah, and how we can better support people like showing up to work as their whole selves as much as anyone can, right?
Yeah.
So that has been really exciting to me, to be able to have that part of like what I've always been passionate about, which is helping others like be able to like shape organizational development in that way.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people who are entering the workforce, who are finding that a lot of companies don't share their morals or respect their identities, or in navigating that conflict that we all face?
Yeah. Frankly, and I say this as someone who was a manager and who like would be on the other end of this if this were to happen at my workplace, but I think frankly, like to, again, like evaluating all things, right? Because some people need a job, you just need a job, and so what it is. Absolutely, once you get into the workplace, you realize how challenging it really is to have a career, especially if you share the kind of values that I assume you and I both share, and see things that are just not right still happening. You know, the nonprofit space is like a little bit behind even corporate America sometimes in terms of norms around how they treat their workers. Not necessarily for profit, but it's a different sort of thing. So instead of like exploiting people for profit, it becomes about people, and this is really true, both bosses accepting and also like the culture being such that people are very mission driven, but that can be used to sort of like push people to their limits and over their boundaries. And people that join the workforce and nonprofits are coming in like also like not expecting to make profit. Like they're not there to get big paychecks. And so they're often really entrenched in the mission and can also push themselves beyond what is like reasonable because they are so sort of like addicted to producing and to like getting that mission, accomplishing those goals. That's actually like one of the harder things to unwrap as we figure out how to like break down white supremacy culture is the sort of like urgency of everything. Yeah. And how to actually slow down when you have like both an organization that might propel you forward and individuals working them. And it's probably the same in, I would assume in like academia or higher ed, because you have people working there that are like deeply passionate and they want to work really hard and they've been trained their whole life from like standardized testing all the way up from college to now to like, you have to like, beat the curve, come out, like exceed expectations. So it's really hard to get people to slow down to a place where it's like, success can just look like you doing your job and nobody right. More. And it's also hard to get organizations to believe that. So I would say, was really just a complaint less than an answer to your question. Like what we're seeing more and more though in this field actually in like reproductive rights and like feminist organizations is workers unionizing, which is the nonprofit space. Not new, it's been happening for a long time, but like a new and sort of like the volume and the sort of tenacity of people organizing within organizations, within nonprofit organizations. I would say like, yeah, like try figure out like who your pod is. Right. Or your truth. Evaluate like what your personal situation is, like whether it's safe for you to do something, like take that kind of risk. And then there are like stuff you don't want to do that. There's like stuff, right? So you could also go the route that I did before, which is like volunteering to be on that committee and being the sort of canary in the coal mine, raising the flag when things are not going the way that they should be. The same thing, like find your people. There's always people in the organization that are like thinking the same thing that you are. So even if you don't decide to actually like organize and like, get cards signed, it can be something just to like meet other people in your field and start having these conversations with each other so that you can like slowly change that culture. And just all support, like when things are bad. Yes. Yes. That was great. All right. Well, do we have any questions from the audience that they want to ask KaeLyn? I am not seeing any currently, but I'll give it a little bit in case someone wants to pop something in there. While we're giving them time to do that, would you like to add anything else right now? No, I mean, thank you for having me. It's always, I love coming back and talking to as students and recent graduates. I think my generation had the really unfortunate reality of graduating into a recession. Your generation having the like equally bad, maybe worse reality of graduating. Yeah, that was a really messed up world. I in the Bush era, you're graduating this post-Trump era, and things are really a mess. That said, I really do believe that like generations even younger than us, than you and I both, and our generations are like on the path to fixing those things. We are clearly much more interested in like as a whole in both being true to our identities and in changing the world for the better ultimately. Yes. So I am hopeful, even as I am like very much wanting the pandemic to be over and better all of you who are, I'm actually teaching right now. And so I feel so bad for students right now. It's so hard. So thank you for doing this and like truly good luck. Thank you so much. It was great having you and thank you for sharing all your experiences. It was
truly insightful and wonderful for all of us.
Yeah, thanks for giving me an excuse to fix my hair.
Of course. Well, thank you. And thank you to everyone who watched. There will be another My Identity and My Career session next Thursday at 12:30. So hopefully we'll see you then. But for now, check out the rest of our Imagine 2022 programming at oswego.edu/Imagine 2022 and have a great night.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.